Hello everyone and welcome to the other big matchup of the penultimate round of this year's FIDE Candidates Tournament, Praggnanandhaa versus Fabiano Caruana. This is their 6th ever encounter. So far they've played 5 games and the score, their head-to-head score is 4 draws and 1 win for Fabiano Caruana. Their first ever encounter was won by Fabi. It was in 2022 in the Tata Steel tournament. Fabi won a very nice game, but all of the games that followed ended in a draw. So big opportunity for Prague, if you can take down a 2800 in a candidates tournament, that goes a long way. But as far as actually winning the candidates tournament goes, Prague no longer stands a chance at doing that. He goes into this round with 6 points. And even with a win with 7, he would not reach the leaders. However, Fabi goes into this round with 7 points, and if he wins, he will be on 8 points, which is definitely within reach of qualifying for the World Chess Championship match. So let's check it out. Prague with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4. And we do have a very nice photo of this matchup, so let's check it out. There we have it. Prague versus Fabi, India versus USA. You can see that Prague has some sponsors there on his suit. Fabi is sponsorless, probably wants so much money already that he can wear clean suits. So, good for him. But yeah, nothing out of the ordinary in the photo. So let's get back to the game. We have pawn to e4, pawn to c5. Fabi goes for the Sicilian defense. We have knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board. We have knight to f6. Sorry, not the Ruy Lopez, the Nimzovich-Rossolimo attack. We have knight to f6, and now bishop captures on c6. We have d captures and pawn to d3. We have queen to c7, already a fairly rare line, but I mean, Fabi has to play for a win. He has to find the most obscure line that exists and throw that at Prague to try and get a point. With black, knight b to d2, we have pawn to e5, and now there are a couple of games that reach this position. Castles is a non-move, knight to c4 is a non-move, but Prague first prepares knight to c4, he plays pawn to a4, and now he says, alright, I will have a nice outpost for my knight on c4, and a4 stops pawn to b5, so I will be very happy here. And it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. We have bishop to e6, controlling that c4 square, and just pawn to b3. Again, preparing knight to c4, because if Fabi decides to capture, Prague will very happily double his c-pawns and gain full control over the d5 square and over the b5 square. So, okay, bishop to e7, and now Prague did go into a 20-minute thing here, and he played knight to c4. And yes, like we said, if you capture, then b captures does mess up your pawn structure, but you are very happy. You have complete control over b5 and over d5 and over f5. Fabi would no longer have a light square bishop, so you can even put a knight on f5. This would be great for Prague. However, after knight to c4, knight to d7, we have knight to g5, and now we have bishop captures on c4. This was a 20-minute thing for Fabi. He had to decide whether to go for this or not. The problem is if you just castle here. And why wouldn't you? The problem is knight captures on e6, and then after pawn captures, queen to g4, attacks the e6 pawn. The only way to defend is rook to f6, and okay, you don't have bishop g5 because of rook to g6, but you can play pawn to a5 and just keep a very strong grip on the position. For example, if rook 8 to f8, you can castle here. And yeah, it's a crazy looking position, but I mean, the e pawns are really weak once you execute a6. Also, the c pawns become very weak. So not the best. So instead, after this knight to g5 move, Fabi played bishop captures on c4. We have b captures, and now knight to f8, shifting the knight over to e6. Point being that now if the queen comes to h5, yes, you will trade on g5, and after, let's say, queen captures or bishop captures, just go knight to e6, and the game continues. Black is perfectly fine here. So after knight f8, queen to g4, now getting ready to move the knight and put some pressure on that g7 pawn. So pawn to h5 by Fabi. We have queen to f5, and now bishop to d6. You could also consider f6, but then you invite knight to e6, and well, it is playable. Fabi decides to go for bishop to d6, just keep the tension. Castles, and now we have queen to e7. Gaining more control over the position and preparing pawn to f6. You want to control that e6 square, so the knight will have to go back. We have queen to h3 and pawn to f6, knight to f3 and pawn to g5, and already it's Fabi who's on the attack here. g4 is coming, and Prague has to be very careful. He moves the knight to d2, and now knight to e6. We have rook to e1 and pawn to g4. Queen goes to e3 and queenside castles for Fabi now. We have queen back to e2 and now rook d to g8. This is preparing pawn to h4. Now, I thought it was interesting to execute pawn to h4 right away, but turns out it's not as great because queen captures can be played, and after rook d to g8, queen f3 obviously holds. Look at this. Knight to f4 goes after the g2 pawn. You can play g4. Yes, that's I mean, a pretty silly variation, but of course, had Fabi played this, Pragg would also find this. And after h captures, let's say f captures and pawn to f5, now you can just play e captures on f5. And if queen h7, putting pressure on the h2 pawn, just knight to f1. And interestingly, yeah, this holds. This holds for white. Nothing wrong with it. So instead, Fabi prepares rook d to g8. Now the g4 pawn will be defended once the h4 is pushed. Knight to f1 and pawn to h4. We have knight to e3. And now, again, you could play g3 right away, but it's just not fast enough. For example, g3, f captures, h captures, and now h3. You can play knight f4 to attack the queen, but after the queen moves, there's no continuation. It's too early to sacrifice on h3, and there's just no good follow-up. So instead, after this knight to e3 move, knight to d4, and now queen back to d1. Guarding the c2 pawn, we have pawn to h3 and pawn to g3. Fabi goes knight to f3 check, we have king to h1, and knight captures on e1. So he does win the exchange, but is it really all that impressive? With Pragg's control over the f5 square that just dominates the bishop, the queen, the f6 pawn, and both of the rooks, how good was this exchange grab? Well, let's see what Fabi does. Queen captures on e1 and queen to d7. We have rook to b1, nicely aligning the rook with that b7 pawn. Bishop to f8. We have bishop back to a3, putting pressure on the c5 pawn. So if the bishop moves to h6 to go after the knight, you will just capture on c5. So king to b8 and now queen to e2. We have king to a8, unpinning from the b file. And now king to g1. We have rook to h7, queen to d1, and now rook h to g7. So no real way for Fabi to actually break through, but there is one. He could put a rook on g5. And then, just advance the pawn to f5. And if knight captures, you just take with the rook. And then if captures, queen captures. And you give back the exchange, but you continue the attack. So here, king to f1 was played. Queen to d8, now controlling this a pawn. a5, a6 was probably a threat in a lot of positions here. But both of them are very low on time. It's 12 minutes for Pragg, 20 minutes for Fabi. And 8 more moves need to be made in order to reach time control. So queen back to e1, rook to g5, and now rook to b3. We have rook to h5, and now rook back to b1. Again, if you play queen b1, you go after the b7 pawn. It's not really a problem, just b6. And if a5, you can even capture here. You don't care. There's just no good way to enter the position. The bishop has no way to enter the game. The knight has no way to enter the game. And it's just... there's just no use in this. Well, it's not lost for black. It's not for white. It's not really great. So after rook h5, we have rook back to b1, just keeping the tension. Bishop to d6, and now bishop to b2. We have bishop back to c7, bishop to c3, and now queen to d7. We have queen to d1. And now bishop back to d6. We have queen to e2, and now bishop to f8. So both players just trying to improve a little bit, but mostly making the other guy burn time. And we are on move 39. So one more move needs to be made in order for time control to be reached. And here we have pawn to f3. The problem is Pragg can no longer maintain this sort of status quo, because if he plays, let's say, pawn to a5, now bishop to h6 is very strong, and you will capture the knight in order to execute f5. And if knight to f5, of course, just rook captures on f5, you will gladly give up the rook for knight and pawn, and then you move the queen, you advance the f-pawn, and the position will be very, very hard to defend. So Pragg decides to go f3 instead, beat Fabi to the punch. G captures, queen captures, and now rook to h7. We have knight to f5, and now queen to e8. We have bishop to d2. and queen to h5, offering a queen trade, which Pragg accepts. We have queen captures, rook captures, and now king to e2. So again, is there a way to break through? Now with queens off the board, it's not really that interesting to capture this knight with the rook. So what else can you do? Well, you can't really break through on the king side. You can't really break through in the center. You have nothing to break through with. So your only breakthrough is on the queen side. If you can get a6 and b5, that is your breakthrough, but you really have to prepare it. So b6, this is very, very important. You do not want to see a5 on the board before you have b6 in. So pawn to b6, and now again, if you play a5, just b captures, and okay, then the b file opens up, but it's black who has the two rooks. So king to f3, now rook to h7. We have pawn to g4, bishop to e7, remaneuvering the bishop over to the queen side. Of course, giving the knight for this silly bishop is a bad move. The knight is great. The bishop is, well, more of a glorified pawn. So king to g3, bishop to d8, and now bishop to e3. We have pawn to a5, now setting up the perfect execution for this pawn to b5, and now rook to b3. We have king to a7, rook back to b1. Pragg has nothing better to do than to wait and see if Fabi can break through. King to a6, and now rook to b2. We have bishop to c7, rook to b1, and rook to b8. So everything is ready for b5. We have rook to f1. Pragg abandons the b file now, and pawn to b5. The breakthrough happens. We have c captures, and now you have to decide which pass pawn do you want to create. Do you capture and then this pawn marches forward, or do you capture here and then Fabi just plays b captures on a4 as it happened in the game. And this is the position now. So it's equal material, but Fabi does have the passed a pawn. Okay, Pragg also has the passed c pawn, but yeah, the a pawn is a bit more advanced and easier to push. So knight to e3, trying to get to the queen side to help out with the pawn, and now bishop to d8. We have bishop to a3 and rook to c8 now, going after the c2 pawn. Now, here Fabi actually has a winning position, but it's one that you don't find over the board, and that is rook h to b7. Point being that after rook h to b7, what do you play? Let's say you play king captures on h3. This is the top move recommended by the engine. Rook to b1. And of course, the rooks cannot be traded. And once you move the rook, then rook to g1. And now with the control over the g file, the threat is to move the bishop and land rook to h8. And that's pretty much it. So that was the idea. But Fabi doesn't do it. He plays rook to c8. He wants Pragg to burn time. And okay, knight to c4 and rook to c6. You can see now it's 11 minutes for Pragg, 16 minutes for Fabi, and there is no more big increments. So you do get an increment for each move, but no like big increment like you do on move 40. So rook to a1 and now bishop to b6. We have bishop back to c1 and the bishop to d4. So still not clear how Fabi will push this for a win. Rook captures on a4 and now bishop to c3. We have rook to a3 going after the bishop and the bishop to b4. Bishop to b4. Fabi probably played again pretty quickly to make Pragg burn time, but also because the forcing bishop to e1 check, king f3, you have to really find all the top moves, but it's still unclear whether you're winning or not. Rook h to c7, and now after the rook moves, you give back the exchange. Captures, and now pawn to g5, let's say captures, and now pawn to a4. And yes, this is very nice for black, but it is far from winning. So Fabi just keeps the tension. Bishop to b4, rook to a2, and now bishop to e1 with check. King to f3, and now not rook to c7, but rook to b7. He wants to go after the b1 square. So bishop to b2, and now rook to b5. Just, again, throwing the move at Pragg. He has less than 2 minutes on the clock, and he has to proceed carefully, and now he played pawn to c3, and this is a mistake. Best was to play g5, and after f captures, then you get g4, and then okay, you capture on h3, you capture on g5, you start advancing the h pawn. It's still a playable position, but after this pawn to c3 move, now Fabi is just much better, and he goes for it. Rook to c7. By playing c3, the d3 pawn has been weakened, and Fabi wants to play rook d7 and go after the pawn. But you might be thinking, but okay, so what? Won't the king just defend? Well, let's just wait and see. We have bishop to a1. You can't really move the rook, because if you move the rook, then rook captures on c4, followed by rook captures on b2. So you should do something, but the bishop to a1 is not that something. Now we have rook to d7, and Pragg is basically without a move. The problem is, if let's say you go king to e2, if you play king e2, then bishop g3 is really scary. You can't move away from the defense of the d3 pawn, that's just losing, and you cannot capture. If you capture, then h2, and you cannot stop the pawn from queening. So that's the problem with king e2. If you try king to e3, you know, stay off of the light square, then rook to c5 is very annoying, and the white is just without a move. Let's say you play rook e2, you go after the bishop, bishop to h4. Now you're going to go for this check, and once the rook retreats, let's say bishop g5 check, king e2, and bishop to f4. Again, no way to guard both the d3 and the h2 pawn. So Pragg decides, all right, since I will not be able to defend it, I might as well advance it, but that will also not help him. Rook to c7. Now the knight has been weakened. Knight to e3, and e captures on d4. Also rook to b3 is very nice, aligning the rook with the king. E captures on d4, c captures rook to b3 now, and king to f4. We have rook to c1, just controlling the entire board, really. And here, Pragg is without a move. He played pawn to e5, which is the strongest move recommended by the engine, but also an insufficient one to survive this onslaught by Fabi. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the winning idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this brilliant maneuver. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is f captures on e5. Not for the sake of capturing on e5, but you want to capture on a1. But first, of course, you have to trade in the center. The real move is rook captures on a1. So first, he captured with check, d captures, and now rook captures on a1. And the knight is just lost. Once the rook moves, the d2 square will be won by the bishop, and then the knight will have no squares. So rook captures on a1, bishop to d2, and now Pragg will lose that knight. There is no way to defend it. You cannot go here or here. So e6, Pragg starts advancing the e-pawn, but now bishop captures on e3, which is the correct move. Had Fabi played rook captures on e3, then after rook to d1, it's actually a draw. For example, rook to d3, a nice discovery, king to e4, and if rook to e3 check, king to d4. And now you're in trouble. The bishop is hanging, the bishop can't really move because the rook would hang, so you might as well capture the pawn and give up the bishop, and now it's a draw. But luckily for Fabi, he played bishop captures on e3. This comes with tempo, king to f5, and now bishop to c5, just guarding the e7 square. Rook to c1 attacks the bishop, king to b6. And now, okay, it'd be great if you could play rook captures on c5, but you can't. If you played it, then comes king captures, and if you advance the pawn to e7, rook to e3 saves the day. If the king was, closer, maybe it'd be possible, but it's not. So g5. And okay, we have bishop to e7. Now comes king to g6. And now pawn to a4. Also possible is rook b2. You just go after the h2 pawn. But pawn to a4 is what Fabi plays. Rook to c8. And now rook to e3. Going after the e6 pawn. Rook to e8. And now pawn to a3. Unfortunately, the capturing the bishop does nothing. So rook back to a8, guarding the against the advancement of the passed pawn. King to b7. We have rook to a5, and now rook captures on e6 with check. King to f7, rook to a6, forcing the rook off of the a file. Rook captures, there's nothing better, so Pragg just trades, captures, and pawn to g6. The problem is, if you capture on e7, you're just slower. Here, queen comes into the game, and, I mean, it's way too slow. So after pawn to g6, a2 was played with pawn to g7, a1 queen, g8 queen, and now queen to a2 check, and he was in this position on move 89 that Praggnanandhaa resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So here you resign because once, okay, if you capture the bishop, then you blunder the queen, obviously, but if queen to g7, then you just trade queens, and you just pick up the pawn, and then you advance this pawn to victory. Let's say bishop captures, king g6, you move the bishop, and in 2 moves you get another queen, and you checkmate the white king. So yeah, a really, really tough game for both of them, but Fabi manages to squeeze out a win with the black pieces against the very strong informed Praggnanandhaa. And now, if you look at the last 4 games that Fabi played, Fabi won 3.5 points out of 4 games. So he has 3 wins and only one draw. He defeated Alireza Vidit and now Praggnanandhaa. And yeah, he is in incredible form, but so is everyone else. Obviously, he's facing Jan Nepomniachtchi in the final round, so it's the really big clash. Both of them have already won the FIDE candidates tournament, Jan not once but twice, and now it's the battle of the candidates, really. So here are the standings. If you haven't seen my previous video, do check it out. It's quite a beautiful game. Gukesh leading with 8.5 points. Gukesh will face Hikaru. So it's really incredible that we have 8.5 Gukesh, Jan, Hikaru, and Fabian 8, and the 4 of them are facing each other in the final round. Now, I mean, you could not have this scripted as well. Gukesh will be facing Hikaru, but Gukesh will have black pieces against Hikaru, but also he's already up half a point ahead of everyone else. But it is Fabi who will have the white pieces against Jan, and Fabi with white, you have to, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be hard because with a draw, it doesn't work for either of them, because if Fabi and Nepo just draw their game, and Gukesh and Hikaru draw, then Gukesh wins, as he's going into the final round half a point stronger. So I'm saying that Fabi and Nepo will have to do something. They will just have to keep playing on forever until one of them loses, because a draw simply doesn't work for either of them. And I don't know. I guess Gukesh won't go too crazy with black, so I'm guessing he will try to go for a nice draw, saying that okay, either Fabi and Nepo win, and then maybe I go into tie breaks. But yeah, you really don't want to lose this in the final round. So yeah, it's gonna be spectacular. Hope you guys are ready for it. I definitely am. And yeah, let's see who will challenge the world champion, who will face Ding. You know, over a grueling match of some classical chess games. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Fabiano. I would like to thank Johan Bridger, Jerry Drever, Felipe Giorgio, Glidebane, and BulletChessThriller.com for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the candidates, we're going into the final round. Well, until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.